Okay, welcome to today's edition of The Forum. I'm your host, Renee Pinnell, founder of Kaleidoscope. And today we've got Colum Slevin, who is, as I just learned, he's got a new title, Head of Media for AR and VR Experiences at Facebook/Oculus. Welcome to The Forum, Colum.
Thanks, Renee. Good to be here. Good to see you.
So we'll get started by giving a quick overview in your own words of who you are and what you do. And then we'll figure out how you got there, and then we'll figure out where you're going next. Sound good?
Sounds great. This should be informative for me, too.
You're going to figure out, this is a self-exploration journey
exactly.
We're going on.
I've just seen this as free therapy. So.
I see it as that as well. So I'm going to dive deep into your psyche. Who are you, Colum? Really, who are you?
Wow. Suddenly, I didn't realize I was talking to Kent Bai.
Kent Bai was actually my favorite interview on this. You should go back and watch it. Everyone should.
Every interview with Kent is my favorite interview. He's a dream.
Let's dive right in.
So I head up a product group here in the AR VR organization at Facebook and Oculus called the Media Group, and we have a pretty specific remit. But it sort of has fairly broad implications in terms of how we work with the community. We are charged with the realm of narrative and media experiences on the platform, and that sort of plays out in two ways. In the medium term, in the immediate term, we're working really hard to deal with two things. First of all, to improve the volume, diversity, and quality of media and narrative experiences available to the audiences, and just improve the overall product experience and content experience that audiences have with media and narrative. And then on the creator side, we are working on eliminating or reducing friction for creators, because there are pretty different challenges for narrative and video and media creators than there are for more specifically interactive or game development teams. And until the establishment of our group, which got set up on its feet almost a year ago, actually, in November of 2018, we weren't taking a specific approach to these types of creators and this type of audience, and so it feels good to be able to pay attention to people who are, to storytellers and to people and the audiences that are there for them.
These are our people, Colum.
They sure are.
You're our Moses. Lead us out of the desert.
Oh, I don't have the haircut.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview. And really, I mean, the work that you and Yelena and your team have done has made a huge impact. I know there's a bunch of projects that just flat out would not exist if you hadn't carved out a space for them to exist. So I'm really excited to know and understand a little bit better about the shift, because you were leading a different team that had a similar but maybe less well-defined mandate. Or remit. I thought only British people called it a remit.
A remit?
Yeah, but
what can I? It's hard to shake off the colonies, man. It's difficult to escape that language basis. We had Yelena and I have Yelena Richitsky, who's our executive producer and sort of really the creative heart and soul of our team. Have worked together for many years now, and the earlier incarnation of this group was a much smaller team. We were like 5 or 6 people, and we spent most of our energy on the sort of the third-party creator side, on finding creators that needed help, on working with teams like your team, like Kaleidoscope, on figuring out ways to support outreach and community development. But the shift is more about a doubling down on the investment, more than doubling down on the investment, like significantly focusing more on that investment in media and narrative, but also to focus on product, because, and what I mean by that is there are the experiences that everyone out there is creating, whether they're building applications or uploading directly to a platform like Oculus TV or Oculus Video. But what we had come to realize over time is that the way the products, those sort of consumer-facing parts of our platform, were being made available to people was pretty fragmented. Like there was a pretty fragmented landscape for, I tend to believe, this is a generalization, but I tend to believe that most sort of early adopter and gaming oriented users who've been in VR for a while and are very passionate and form a lot of the core of the user base have a high tolerance for friction. They tend to be willing to hunt and peck and figure out like where to find the stuff that they love, and that's great. And we appreciate those users in that audience very much, but it doesn't speak to the rest of the world. Like when my mom puts on a headset, or when other people who have less of a tolerance for friction put on a headset, we want to be able to present them with experiences that are immediate and are delightful and are consistently available. So we're working. So that's the biggest shift in our focus, is that a lot of our team are focused on the consolidation and improvement of the products that people engage with on the platform, as well as the stuff they see.
That's fascinating. I didn't actually know that. So do you have product designers on your team now, Colum, that are helping with reducing that friction?
Yeah, we have a cross-functional team that consists of engineers, in addition to the still sort of beating heart of our team, which is focused on production and programming and developer and producer partnership. We have engineers, data scientists, data engineers, product designers, product managers, who are focused more on. I mean, we announced 2 specific things at our developer conference in the last couple of weeks that are examples of this, and they exist at either ends of the sort of the user pipeline. At one end, we have a new product we're calling Media Studio, which is
really excited about that.
Yeah, so that's our team is developing that product, and it's sort of it's where the rubber meets the road for creators who want to distribute on our platform. And historically, that process has been challenging and laden with friction and somewhat fragile. And so Media Studio is a product we're hoping will solve a lot of the friction issues that developers currently have. And then at the other end of the pipeline, where we're a little bit later this year, we're planning on launching a sweeping update to Oculus TV, which will be sort of a consolidated viewing surface and consumption surface and discovery surface for stories and media of all types. So that's sort of the product focus we've got. Yeah.
I had to be pulled away from the keynote for the second part. I caught the first Media Studio thing. The Media Studio is just for 360 video, right?
No. Media Studio is for certainly for 360 video, which is probably where it has the most immediate impact, because distributing 360 video on in the Oculus headset previously involved using essentially the sort of a Facebook page as an upload mechanic, which is perfectly great for day-to-day users and day-to-day sort of for user-generated content, but not quite robust enough for professional creators or for people who are creating a lot of content. But the goal for Media Studio is for it to be available to a wide range of types of format, including formats like Quill and other types of narrative forms.
But it wouldn't be appropriate for like a standalone experience. Like let's say Battlescar, for instance, it's linear narrative, but it is a 6DoF experience. That would be a different publishing pipeline, right?
Right, that's right. Like if something is a self-contained application and executable in its own right because it has to be, then it would exist it would go through the store basically. The overlap in the Venn diagram we're hoping to tease out as Media Studio gets out there and continues to be more widely adopted, is where are there experiences that currently are uploaded as apps because that's the only
Right.
avenue available to people that could go through Media Studio instead, and could go through that discovery surface where we're able to feature and promote and curate experiences in collections in a way that gives them an audience.
So the just to abstract it out away from the technology, Media Studio will hopefully be a tool that you can use to publish anything is it linear? Is that the issue? Is it the lack of specific interactivity, or is it more about story driven? Like where does the demarcation line come in terms of content?
It's more about story driven. I think
Okay.
we have a lot to learn, and collectively as an industry. But one thing we're really hoping to learn over the coming months and year is, where is that demarcation from a user experience perspective between a game and an experience, and expect
Such
the
a hard
lines.
one.
It's the big question, right? I mean, it's the existential question for a lot of what we do, and I'm looking forward to the time, because I think it's going to come eventually where we're not having that debate anymore, and we're not trying to use taxonomy and nomenclature to sort of say, oh well, these are the things. I've done this myself, so I'm guilty of it too. But these are the things that define a game, so the games are going to sit over here, and these are the things that define a story, so they're going to sit over here. I think because of the nature of the medium, the lines are profoundly blurry, and I think it's super risky to sort of put hard and fast definitions around stories versus games versus experiences right now, and just I like the idea of letting the audience lead the way.
Well, there are all kind of experiences, right? I mean, like experiences is kind of the broadest umbrella that I could imagine. I mean, it's an experiential medium.
Totally.
So do you think there's a version of the future where Media Studio is just how everything gets published? Like if there is this.
Wow, I couldn't say. No, I don't think so. I think that Media Studio is primarily a channel for. Yeah, I mean, you can have a linear interactive experience, right? I mean, the Quill, the Sixth Off Quill experiences, a lot of people. There is the potential to build interactivity in, and it has that capacity in there.
Sidebar, so excited for what Quill is doing for the animation world. Like it's collapsing like 10 positions into one. We had Knock on here, is this amazing Quill animator based in LA, and his work is amazing. I mean, there's like 1 million people that are doing fantastic stuff. I think that's going to have a huge impact.
I'm excited about that format. I think that you're right. I mean, the collapsing multiple positions into one piece of it is the thing I find exciting about Quill in particular, is not so much that it's a cost saving or a labor saving device, because that's a byproduct, but more that an individual artist can sit in a room and produce something from end to end because a lot of what is clobbered storytelling in VR up until now has been people taking a filmmaking model and simply scaling it to match the medium, and that's like, of course it's going to be more expensive, of course it's going to be more time consuming if you take that monolithic, expensive, data heavy model and just apply it. Whereas you take something like Quill, which has a look and a feel for sure, like you can't what I don't like getting hung up on is, well, what are the things you can't do in Quill? Like there's a myriad of things you can't do in any medium, but what can you do? And seeing people like Goro and Knock and Daniel and Daniel Pajcek or Nick Ladd or all of the people we talk about all the time, and seeing what they do, and then suddenly realizing, oh, when you take a medium like this, the artist's expression sort of tends to breathe through it, and it becomes less about. For a while, I would look at Quill and all I would see was Goro, because all I ever saw was Goro's work, until I sort of see other people like Wesley and other people sort of taking the ball and running with it. It just I have high expectations for what it's going to do. I think in the next year or so, you're going to start to see people gravitate towards that medium in a way that just hasn't been available to them before.
So Quill will be something that you can publish through there. What, like, just in terms of nuts and bolts, like what else can you, like, today or in the near future, publish through there? If I'm building something in Unity, how can I get that through the Media Studio pipeline?
Well, for starters, we are really focusing on media, on the linear media to begin with. I'm conflating part of this with what our long-term ambition is.
Got it. So
Like
right now, can you do Quill, or is that still
no,
future?
Quill is to come.
Okay, got it.
People are working on it directly, and
All right.
we're pushing as hard as we can to have it be available as early as possible. But it'll trail somewhat because we want the experience to be understandable to people in terms of the product, and to build it out gradually in the feature set in a way that makes sense.
Can you give us like a ballpark of when that'll be available? Like, I don't want to hold you to anything, but like a year or like 6 months
No,
or?
it's sooner than it's smaller than a bread van, bigger than a bread box. It's coming. It's coming as soon as possible. A Media Studio is out there and in use right now by creators. We launched it at Oculus
Yep.
Connect. We took a bunch of applications from people, and Avesh and the product team are cranking to get everyone on board to it. In terms of when something like Quill will be added to, that's coming a little bit down the road. And what's almost more important when you talk about different media formats and different narrative formats is the distribution side. So once the update to Oculus TV launches, because we've got the top of the funnel with Media Studio where we can start ingesting stuff, but what's almost more important is that we have the right distribution mechanic and that it's visible and available to people, and that really won't click into gear until Oculus TV relaunches with its sort of wider variety of experiences.
And ballpark of when that's going to happen?
We're aiming for this year.
Okay, badass. So, right now through Media Studio, where does the stuff end up, or is it simply not published?
Right now, it's going to Oculus Video or the typical locations it would go to.
Okay, cool, man. I'm so excited about that. Again, Moses leading us out of the desert. We need distribution figured out on so many different levels. But even, right. I mean, obviously we need more headsets in the wild and all that. But like once you get in the headset, making it low friction, making discoverability easy, and then making it a platform that's open to lots of different artists, which I know is a topic that on the launching standalone apps on Quest has been particularly sensitive for artists. It's been a very challenging process for a lot of people that are trying to get their projects out. And I wondered if you could talk to that. Like, I know you're such a champion of creators, and how would you suggest as an artist that you go about approaching something like the Quest, and how might Media Studio and what you're doing in Oculus TV make this a more open and accessible platform for the artists in our community?
Yeah, I think we collectively as a platform, we really try to walk a line between, I talked to our long-term goal is a two-sided market, right? Our long-term goal is that creators are making things and, making money, and that audiences are finding things and happily reciprocating by paying money, and that flywheel is turning.
I like that.
And that's the goal. I mean, that's the whole point. I think it's a journey. It's a journey to get there. And the line we're walking as a platform is between accessibility and openness and availability to creators, but balancing that with understandable curation for audiences, because the last thing you want to do is, first of all, you don't want to have a store that just looks like a dumpster of hit and miss things and various things. I think it's important to have a level of, especially for a new medium like this, a level of thoughtfulness that goes into the curation of the experiences. So you want to have things to be messy or disorganized, and also I think you want to have an eye towards an editorial point of view and some quality in general. Having said that, the relaunch of Oculus TV, part of our goal is to corral narrative experiences and storytelling experiences into a location that isn't lost in the noise of, there's so much great stuff out there on the store that is fundamentally interactive. It's game based. And it's curated in its own way, but it's difficult for narrative creators sometimes to rise above the noise in that context. And what Oculus TV gives us an opportunity to do is to give that content a stage and a spotlight all its own. I have no doubt we'll have the same struggles we collectively as a platform have with any form of curation when it comes to that. I don't have a silver bullet for every creator who's out there, obviously, but we try to treat every situation as on its merits and elevate everybody consistently.
You touched on something that I thought was really interesting that I wanted to get clarity on, which is monetization. And forgive me for not doing a deeper dive in this. Like I'm like everyone else, crazy busy, and I have to actually talk to the guy that's making the thing to get. I could go Google it. But monetization, Oculus TV, how's that going to work in Media Studio? What are you going to be able to charge per piece of content? Is it subscription model? Is it like Spotify? Like how are you handling transactions for artists?
So we're not yet, but not because it's there isn't a technical limitation on it. We need to build that in the consumer behavior in general. I believe that monetization is a byproduct of users feeling clearly that they're getting a demonstrable value from the platform. And you see that a lot with a lot is a loaded term. You are starting to see that with on the game development side, where we talked about it at Oculus Connect. We have a million seller on the platform. We have a clearly established pattern where when people understand the value they're getting from a game, they're willing to pay. I think that there's a couple of things about that. Number one, there are established sort of behaviors on all of our parts when it comes to the consumption of games. We understand on mobile platforms, on console platforms, and all sorts of relatable platforms, what the models are and what value we feel we're willing to pay for in those experiences. When it comes to storytelling and media, there are certainly models out there. You mentioned a few of them, like subscription based or even per item based in-app purchase, all of which are possible. But what we have to do first is build the volume, diversity, and quality of the experiences in the store to a point where that becomes a reality. I mean, we are monetizing certain things that fall in the storytelling realm right now, or developers are monetizing certain things that fall in the storytelling realm right now. But in terms of a widespread monetization model, that's still something we're building towards.
That makes sense. So initially, anyone that's looking to distribute through the Media Studio has to be comfortable with distributing their work for free, right? Just understand that.
That's fair. Right.
Okay. I'm curious, a project like Vader Immortal, which I'd love to touch on at some point in this conversation if we have time. But would that live in the Media Studio Center?
So
would that be, or Oculus TV rather?
In Oculus TV, that's something we've talked about. I think that Mike Verdu, who heads our content and gaming group, and I partner really closely on all of this stuff. We talk a lot about where the line is, and wherever possible, we're thinking about it from an audience perspective. Like, where will the audience expect to see? And where do they need to see that? In my mind, it certainly could live in both. I think that what I think we should be doing as a service to users and to our audience is wherever someone shows up habitually, and that's what we really want to do, is build this habit where people are entering the world on a frequent basis, that the things they expect to see and the surprises they weren't expecting but they're delighted by are all in the right place. So I can imagine a world where something like Vader Immortal lives above the fold in the store, but also lives in Oculus TV because people perceive it as a story. But it just, in terms of how we would design that distribution, we just need to design it in a way that wasn't confusing to people. The fact of the matter is, with that particular series right now, we just launched we launched episode 1 back in May. We launched episode 2 2 weeks ago, and so sort of that project is in flight. So I'm not sure we would change the way we're distributing it currently, but for future experiences, we certainly might do that.
Cool, man. I'm so excited. Okay. A lot of ground to cover. I don't want to miss anything. I feel like it'd be good to maybe like take a step back just a moment and talk about Colum Slevin the man. We've been in very little therapy. I've just been doing my lazy research on what the fuck's going on with Media Studio and Oculus TV by talking to you. But I want to know, how did you get into this? When was the moment that you thought VR was a thing that you wanted to dive into, and what was the background that led you to a place to be receptive to because 2015 is pretty early to jump ship, and you've done a bunch of very prestigious things leading up to that. So that must have not been a terribly easy decision, or maybe it was. Maybe you saw it. And
it's a good question. I mean, the question is, what was I thinking?
Yeah, what were you thinking, man? What a terrible idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I just woke up one day and so here's the I've thought about it a lot. Here's the journey that I took. I've certainly worked in sort of more traditional entertainment media for most of my career. I started out working in feature film animation and dabbled in episodic TV animation, worked in post-production visual effects, but always in film for a long time, and a little bit of games. And but I'd always been drawn to especially the use of technology in the service of storytelling. Like, I mean, the truth is, and this is how old I am, Renee. I when I started working in animated features, the only computer was the motion control computer attached to the camera stand. We used paint, we used ink, we used film, but I was always interested in how technology was there were a small number of motion control shots and computer controlled hidden line sort of renderings and that kind of things in early movies I worked on, and I was fascinated by that. Like, how do you use a computer to tell a story? And then so that led me into computer graphics and the use of computer graphics for visual effects and for storytelling in general. So I've always been interested in chasing that sort of breaking wave of what techniques are in use that haven't been fully proven yet. Because what was interesting about the early days of visual effects, the early days of computer graphics and the use of visual effects in the sort of early to mid 90s was, and actually I have to attribute this quote to Alex Hennig from Magnopus, because he and I were talking about this a couple of years ago. And what he said was, in those days, everything was a prototype. Like, everything you did was hey, is this going to work? And you would do that. You weren't quite that flippant about it, but there was a calculated scheme in everything you took on. There were almost no shots in movies that were like, oh yeah, this is a slam dunk. This stuff is easy. So that's what VR feels to me now. Like, VR feels still like uncharted territory. So the rate that I talk all the time about, when is it going to happen? When's the flywheel going to kick in? Is part of the excitement for me. Is well, we're so early in the development of this as a medium that there's still opportunity to make a mark and to take a risk and to fail and to pick yourself up and try again. In terms of what drew me to it, so that's sort of the, in hindsight, what I think is the element of VR that always appealed to me. In terms of what drew me to it as a medium was, truthfully, I never thought it would be a reality in my lifetime. Like, I grew up reading sci-fi that was riddled with fanciful or fictional imaginings of VR. Like, William Gibson was my favorite. I mean, a lot of people, like, everyone has an origin story about like the fiction or the film that led them into VR. And I read Neil Stephenson, but William Gibson was my guy. Like, he's who I gravitated to, mostly because of the poetry of his language and how he described cyberspace and how he described virtual virtual experiences. But the truth is, I never thought it would be a thing. So when the first, I was actually working at a game developer in 2014, and Nate Mitchell from Oculus came by with a DK and was showing us a bunch of stuff, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe that it was here, and I was like, that thing he brought in his backpack, not counting the giant PC he had in another backpack or whatever, but like that thing he brought in his backpack it's VR. It's here. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, that's what led me to it, and then to discover that Oculus needed help figuring out how storytelling was going to be addressed or solved in VR was like catnip. I couldn't stay away. So I fled the game development work I was doing to try to help people tell stories with the thing that went in your face.
Was this like DK1 or DK2 that you had your first VR?
I think it was a DK2.
Okay, yeah. DK1 was, you had to use your imagination with that,
right? DK2.
I tell this story often, but I'm curious what it was for you, if you remember the first experience that really clicked. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was Titans of Space. I don't know if you ever tried that one, but did you?
I don't think so.
Oh man, it was so good. It was back when it was before the Oculus Store launched. Well, before then, it was just that little forum thing, and there was like a handful of experiences that were good. But Titans of Space and Daniel Ernst's project Blocked In, those were the two. And then Nick Pidham did these renditions of Miyazaki films, like scenes from those. Like those three experiences with the DK1 were they were so crappy. The DK1 was so crappy, but those experiences, you could kind of squint, you could see through the screen door, especially if you smoked a little pot. You really could like be like, oh, I see where this is going. I'm into it. So what was for you? What was like the first experience where it sort of clicked and you're like, oh, okay, like it's not just theory anymore. I'm actually seeing something that's really connecting with me.
I mean, this is so basic, but seeing Henry making eye contact with me. When I first visited, I visited with the Oculus Story Studio team in San Francisco, and with the Medium team too, with Brian Sharp and Lydia Choi. And I tried a bunch of stuff, but that the moment, spoiler, but the moment at the low point of Henry's story where he makes eye contact with you, was like I jumped out of my skin. Like I think a lot about the evolution of the cinematic form, and it's very rare to say like, oh, I was there, or I saw this movie when they first did this thing for the first time. Like everything you see is a variation of something that's been done before.
Yeah.
But to see something in VR that is like, oh, he sees me and he sees me seeing him, and it just like my brain started short circuiting and thinking about like what the possibilities were, and obviously as the guys will tell you, it was it's not a particularly sophisticated trick, but it was that first glimpse of oh, this is I'm not just watching a short film. I'm a participant, and I'm influencing things here. It just sort of blew the world open for me.
It feels like the same magic that you get with live theater, but it's scalable, right? Like being able to take that sense of the performer being aware of the audience and feeding off the audience, while the audience doesn't necessarily have to be an active participant. They're still a participant just by their presence there.
Totally. There's another story that I tell people a lot, which actually didn't come back to me until I tried Henry. But when I was a little kid, I can't remember how little I was, but I was too young, definitely too young to go see this play. My parents took me to see The Merchant of Venice in Dublin, and Shylock was played by a legendary Irish stage actor called Cyril Cusack, and when he makes his speech about if you prick us, do we not bleed? He has this like apoplectic spasm of anger, and he like knocked over a teacup, and he was like spitting, he was frothing at the mouth, and he made eye contact with me. I was in like the third row, and I was completely riveted by this guy. I was terrified because he was 10 feet away from me, and he could see I was terrified, and he fed off that. At least I thought he did. He fed off that, and then sort of like fed his performance. So yeah, it's 100% right. Like what excited me about the Henry moment was like, I was like, I know this creature is not intelligent, but I can see a place down the road where you can have a creature that is actually has a degree of intelligence that will feed off of your behavior, that isn't just the position of your head and the direction of your gaze. And I wonder what that will lead to. So yeah, I think live theater is a pretty powerful metaphor.
That's one thing I think about, and the other is like lucid dreaming, where the dream is, it's you're not entirely in control of it, but you're sort of aware that it's happening, and it changes based on your awareness. I feel like I feel like we're headed towards some beautiful mashup between live theater and lucid dreaming, where you can create these story worlds on the fly based on the experience being aware of your emotional state and what you're excited about, what you're afraid of, and leading you down different paths based on that without you even consciously making any decisions. It's just so aware of your mental state that it can craft the story that's just the place you want to go.
God, I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. Either that or we'll just short circuit like you did when you saw Henry. And
we'll just curl up on the floor.
At the mat. Yeah. Right. That sounds fine too. So cool. Okay. Another topic that I think is interesting to discuss is the other side of your business, which is, your department, which is funding content.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to know what type of projects you're interested in supporting, and what are the sort of areas that you're personally or as a department really excited about pushing.
Yeah. So we're as we're starting to, I hate to say mature, because I hope we don't, but as we're starting to grow and sort of develop further and spend, we've put a fair amount of miles on the clock over the last few years in terms of partnerships and content we've either co-produced or supported or funded. We're starting to take a very intentional, thoughtful, fairly systematic approach to a lot of this, and a lot of this was driven by Yelena. And the approach we're trying to take now is to, wherever possible, either develop a set of hypotheses around gaps we see in the market, or gaps we see in the form, right? Where we go, look, there's clearly there's some there when it comes to interactive storytelling, but we haven't pushed, one specific boundary yet. Let's figure out how to, for instance, use live actors. You talked about live theater, and what we're trying to do is take a lot of these theories and hypotheses that we all talk about at in various forums about things that will be interesting to experiment with, and actually build actual experiments around them. The first one that really led us down this path, I think, was probably the Underpresents with Tender Claws, where we saw the opportunity to work with a developer that was doing something weird and crazy and risky and
super risky,
but with specifically tackling this exact problem where we're like, oh, so we've all, a lot of us have heard really fascinating stories about the use of improv and the use of live theater techniques in the development of experiences. The Fable guys on Wolves on the Walls famously, at least famously to me, worked with Third Rail to develop a believable non-player character by scripting her using improv techniques. Yeah. And we were thinking, well, what would it mean if rather than baking improv techniques into a behavior library for a character, what if you just had improv actors in there I'm saying this like we cooked up this idea. We didn't, but when we spoke to Sam and the team at Tender Claws and realized that this was the road they were going down, we jumped at the opportunity to test that hypothesis and see what's going to happen. So anyway, long story short, we're we have a series of sort of content areas we're interested in exploring. Interactive storytelling, or as the team would say, spatial storytelling is one. Another one on the other end of the spectrum is peak quality video. Like the part of the problem with that you see with some of the video on the platform is that there is a deep there's a deep library of not great quality content out there that is just created by people with 360 cameras. I mean, it's great that capture devices have become relatively ubiquitous, but there's only so many wingsuit videos and downhill skiing things you can watch in a headset. And those are fine, but I think they're distractions, or
that's like the YouTube of VR stuff, right?
Which is great.
You need you need that, but it's not.
But if you want to push the bounds of comfort and engagement, you really need, it's something John Carmack is very focused on, and something Eric Chang and our team is very focused on. So we've been experimenting with 180. We've been experimenting with, this is why we work with John Griffith and the Alpine Adventures guys on this Everest piece they put together, because because first of all, it's a great story and it's an extraordinary subject matter, but second of all, it lent us the opportunity to push the quality, the peak quality boundaries that we were seeing in video in a way that people hadn't seen before. And so Eric Chang who's sort of our immersive media lead and deals with the higher end of our live action partnerships, is working on a series of immersive narrative experiences that are all driven off this idea of, like, what if you showed someone video in the headset that made them feel like they were actually there, as opposed to just watching something that's a distraction. And we've got a range of these types of hypotheses that we're trying to tackle, but we're actually in the midst of right now planning our 2020 sort of portfolio, and how like what problems do we want to tackle in 2020 and beyond, that will also hopefully support and elevate the creative community.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're supporting video, because I think I was down on it for a while because the quality wasn't there across the board. Visual fidelity, resolution on screens, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like it has recently crossed a threshold where the resolution is good enough, both in terms of acquiring the capturing the images and then playing them back, and just a lot of just like little optimizations have made it so it's the stereoscopy, whatever the fuck that word is. Oh my god, that word, and anonymity. Oh my god, I can't I have my brain.
No, pseudonymity is the worst.
I don't even know what that means. It's like partially anonymous. Oh no! Oh my god, yeah.
It means you got to fake it.
Yeah, that one is makes my brain fry.
I feel like I just derailed you hard.
No. That was these forums are all about being derailed. But I think we're there with video. So I'm bullish on video for the first time in a long time. There's this company called Funique in Taiwan. I saw a demo of theirs at Cannes this year. Their quality is just great. It's like, amazing. I mean, Felix and Paul had been sort of the gold standard for me, and their quality from a technical perspective is even better. Really, really just top notch. So I'm once again
fighting words there.
Yeah, fighting words. But it's we need all the amazing talented people we can throwing everything they got at this, because Felix, but all that stuff is still a challenge to get that high level quality of video. And one of the things that I'm really pumped about is the next level, which is which is volumetric. And I'm wondering how that plays into the media studio, how that plays in with your mandate for peak quality video. Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, thinking about volumetric a lot. I think that, oh, man, I'm going to get in so much trouble with people for saying this, but so I think volumetric video is the future, but we're a ways away. You know, the the size of the data sets and the complexity of the capture workflows are such that I just don't think we're there yet, or we're remotely close to being there yet in terms of having, you know, distributable experiences. There are so many technical challenges to overcome, which I think are really important, and people are tackling those challenges on all ends. Obviously, um, uh, uh, there were a number of people dealing with sort of the notion of holography as a medium, which is really powerful, all the way from the scatter guys who have embraced this notion of using an aesthetic treatment to sort of make you look past the artifacts that exist in current capture. All the way to the other end of the spectrum with, you know, what Microsoft and Intel and others are doing in terms of creating photoreal, believable holograms. The problem is, you know, just getting that stuff out to a wide audience right now is really challenging to do unless you bake it down and just create something that's digestible in a 360 or another digestible format. But I definitely think it's the future. Like I'm incredibly excited by it. I'm always wary of us getting out over our skis with any format that just is really close but not ready for prime time yet, because then you run the risk of everyone going, you know, hey, this didn't work. It'll work. It'll just take time and a lot of brains on it to get it to a place where it's viable for mass consumption.
So on the video front, you feel like stereo 360 or stereo 180? Like, do you have opinions about or mono? Like, what's the what's the resolution threshold?
Yeah.
Like, just from a nuts and, you know, on the quality of just the media,
Yeah.
where are we at? Where do you think people should be aiming for?
I mean, I have a bias towards to good quality stereoscopic video. I think that, you know, okay, so I think it should be the right decision to fit the creative that you're going for, right? I don't think there's actually a technical formula for this is better than that. Like, for instance, we use 180 monoscopic video in our venues product because it so happened that was the most comfortable and enjoyable viewing experience based on our testing for that particular format. Having said that, we are experimenting with stereo for stereoscopic for venues too, because I think for certain form factors it works better than others. 180 is also really interesting for a couple of reasons. One is you can pack a lot of pixel density into half the real estate of a 360 sphere, so you get really, really good looking video, but you have to be dealing with a subject matter that doesn't require you to, you know, to see in 360 degrees. And so something like that was another good example of a hypothesis driven project. The tested VR piece we did with Adam Savage, we were thinking a lot about, and actually Eric and Yelena were thinking a lot about, what are topics or subjects that work really well in this sort of proscenium format, where you've got either we talked about close-up magic, we talked about and we eventually landed on watching a creator or a craftsperson in close proximity work on something that is detailed and detail oriented and high in resolution would be perfect for 180, because you're so riveted by the thing you're seeing here that you don't really worry about looking back here and looking back here.
Super smart.
So I think I feel like I'm evading the question, but I think the format should be driven by the subject matter wherever possible, and it's our job to develop a pipeline and an ingest funnel and a distribution platform that is as flexible as possible for pretty much any format. Because video is video at the end of the day. We shouldn't be limiting or restricting people based on the specific format they go with.
Colum, has anyone ever told you have a very soothing voice?
Yeah, I've gotten that in different, sometimes really in kind ways, the way you just said it, and in other ways as well.
I would love to listen to like a meditation app by you. I feel like all my levels are balanced out now.
That's my backup plan.
It's good. Go. Maybe that should be your A plan.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in the back stretch, the home stretch of this. Now it's time to open it up for some questions. We've got some coming in, people on the line. Let's throw some more. If you want to talk to Colum directly, let me know in the chat log and I'll promote you to a speaker. But let's start with Alan. How long does it take to complete a project like Crow or Dear Angelica? What's a rough estimate of the cost? Thanks for that question, Alan.
Well, I'll say right out the gate, I won't talk about cost, because we don't talk about development cost of the projects we work on. But I can definitely talk about development cycles and timelines. Dear Angelica is an interesting example, because Dear Angelica was a parallel development of a story that was going through the typical life cycle that every story goes through, from ideation to, storyboarding, through, pre-visualization, and then sort of rinse and repeat, trying to figure out like the emotional beats and the mechanics of the arc of the story. But simultaneously, Inigo and the team were working on developing Quill, which was the tool that they used to actually produce the experience. And it was one of those completely, when I say one of those, I don't know that I've ever seen this before in any other format at this scale, but it was a situation where Wesley Osbrook, the art director and the lead artist on the piece, the sort of hands-on creator of the piece, was working hand in glove with Inigo on a day-to-day basis. So he was developing and evolving and refining the tool based on her use of the tool. So that adds a certain amount of overhead and time, linear time to the development cycle. So Dear Angelica is not a good example of how long it should take, because the team were doing multiple things at once. They were developing a pipeline and tool and a story at the same time. I think all told, from beginning to end, we spent over a year on Dear Angelica, but mainly because we were building Quill at the same time.
Yeah. Now that project would take a month. I bet you could bust out Dear Angelica in a fraction of that time, because it's basically what Quill animations have come.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the goal. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And the animation tool set that the Lily and Goro and Pierre and the team on the Quill side have been working on, or directly targeted at putting that sort of power in the hands of just every creator. Something like Crow the Legend by Baobab, again, a project goes through a certain amount of most of the, I think a lot of the people listening to this would know this, but basically the trick to producing animation or immersive narrative also is to spend as much time as you can afford hammering out your expensive problems before they actually become expensive, right? So whether that's on paper or using a prototyping tool like Quill or Medium or Tilt Brush, or you name it, just sort of roughing out ironing out the rough spots before you bring the team on that are actually going to produce the thing, because then then the meter really starts running. Actually don't, I just realized I'm tap dancing because I can't remember how long Crow actually took from beginning to end.
Did you work on Crow? Was that a co-production? I didn't know that.
It was a co-production with Baobab. Yeah, we supported them in the development of that piece, and
that's fantastic.
We obviously have enormous regard for that team, but that was the first. We've published all of their pieces, but that was the first piece where we had a direct hand in partnering with them. Yeah.
Yeah, great piece. In my experience, projects, I didn't work on either of those, but in my experience, yeah, they're normally about a year of development, but you've got, the time to package and
Yeah,
pitch it on the, before it even goes into development. And then you've got distribution sides. So a project like Spheres, that was almost 14 months of
right.
pitching from the first time that we started working with Eliza,
Yeah,
and then about a year of development.
amazing project. I think that's fair. I'm so loath to put a timeline on something because it's so variable depending
Yeah.
on the subject matter and the running time and the creative team and how, there are, if you're making an animated an episodic animated series, if you're making a movie, from script to launch, you're probably talking 2.5 years for an average film, um, uh, or again, depending on the complexity and the subject matter. If you're making an episodic TV show, that is 26 episodes of 22-minute animated show, you're spending 2 years soup to nuts on the whole process getting through it. VR is so unbounded right now, but it's hard to put a timeline on it. But I think adding in all the stuff you're talking about, pitching and fundraising and concept and all that kind of stuff to ship, I think a year is a good estimate.
We got another question from here in the question logs. When do you think monetization for good 360 videos in Oculus TV will happen? Producers may hold on to releasing their content until this happens, thus delaying the audience engagement that you're looking for. That's a good point, Paul.
That's a good question. I think I hesitate to put a specific timeline on it just because I don't know. I think the way we're approaching this right now is by trying to think about, well, how do we support the high quality projects through funding or distribution or whatever it might be, film festival support, whatever it might be, so that they can get out there. And as part of that process, so that we can experiment with monetization models and pricing models that might work. And so my goal is that rather than, because the truth is, most producers, it's not so much that they'll hold on to stuff; they just won't make it if they don't think there's a point in an end in sight. So our approach tends to be, well, let's try to remove the friction from that process by helping them make it. And my hope is in the coming year that we can start conducting some pricing experiments with developers to see what will stick.
Awesome. Maria on the line. I know this isn't your division, but what do you think of Horizon?
Oh yeah.
What's going on there? Do you have any like how's storytelling going to play out in Horizon?
That's a great question. I think so. For those who don't know, obviously Horizon was an experience we announced at Oculus Connect. Megan Fitzgerald, who's our marketing lead for the experiences team in general, talked about it on stage. And essentially, Horizon is our next generation social product. Now I can't talk, for VR. How storytelling is going to work in Horizon. I think a lot of the storytelling in Horizon will be driven by emergent user behavior. My hope is we're working very closely with the Horizon team on what narrative experiences or shared social experiences would be in Horizon. We're not. I don't want to pretend we're there yet and we've done something yet. But something that excites me a lot is the notion of something like The Under Presents, but in a massive social setting, so that imagine you had an interactive theater piece, but you were attending it with all of your friends from from across the world in a virtual space. I think there's enormous potential there. So yeah, I'm not the person to speak about Horizon as a product in detail. I just know that we're counting on it being a destination for people, and hopefully a place where they'll also experience stories.
Yeah, I'm excited about anything that gets social on the map. I mean,
Yep.
what you all did with Half and Half and Max's SDK for building social into products, all that stuff is like, it doesn't work for everything,
Right.
but almost everything. Social just adds so much.
Yeah, we love Max.
Yeah, it's just so great to do a thing with your friend. It's like traveling. When you're traveling by yourself, you're like, oh man, that tree or mountain or whatever, that's real pretty. But if there's no one to share it with, you kind of feel it less.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
That's why I like going to the movies with a buddy, even though we're sitting there in silence. I enjoy it more than watching a movie by myself, because every now and then you can kind of elbow him and be like, whoa.
Yeah, or talk about it afterwards or whatever.
Yeah, talk about it. Yeah. Another question, follow up from Paul, and then we've only got another minute, so we've got time for one more question after this. Shall we go through the app? So regarding Media Studio, shall artists go through the application and then work with your team on a way to monetize it? Yeah, I think that's what he was meaning.
Yeah, I mean, that's always something. Obviously, monetization, or to the extent that that's something you want to do, is a decision on the side of the developer. It's not something we dictate. But yeah, it's something we can talk about how to go about it.
Any other questions from the folks on the line before we say goodbye to Colum?
And in true Silicon Valley fashion, I'm getting booted out of my conference room here by an eager next meeting.
Hey, Colum, I really appreciate you being generous with your time.
That's my pleasure.
It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too, Renee. And thanks.
All right.
Thanks for everybody on the line. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. All right, we'll talk soon. Bye, buddy.
Take care. Bye.